Excellent. Okay, cool. Thank you very much, everyone, for tuning in for another episode of Level Up Club. It's an absolute pleasure to be here with you guys today, episode 3. So thank you for following along. Um, Today, we're going to be talking about food, and we're going to be talking about our relationship with food. And what I've done is I've enlisted the help of someone who has quite a lot of knowledge in this area. So I hope you guys enjoy this show. If you're listening to it on stereo, please do chime in if you have any questions. And if you're listening to the playback on YouTube, feel free to drop in some messages into the comment section, and we will try to get back to you as soon as possible. Cool. Let's just get started. Let's introduce our very valuable guest on the show today. Thank you, Tania, for joining us today. Tania she's an expert in the area of food and our emotional relationships that we can form with food. And I'm really happy to have her here today. So welcome to the show.
Hello.
Excellent. How are you doing, Tania?
I'm really good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm very well, thank you. I'm very well. I was enjoying the sunshine today, and life's getting better. I think it's going to be linked to obviously some of the stuff that we're talking about in today's show, but getting a much better grasp of my emotions, and it's having a profound effect in multiple areas of my life. And I'd really like for some of the listeners to also kind of share in some of that energy and that knowledge that can bring them a bit of peace.
Honestly, absolutely. So what you just said then is really, really key. So what you just said then was you are getting to grips with your emotions, and like you said, it can affect so many different areas in our lives. And
Definitely.
when it comes to food, what happens is when it comes to food, people tend to completely forget about that. They don't associate the emotions with the food. Quite often we blame the food and we think the food is the problem. When quite often, well, 9 times out of 10, it's the emotions and how we respond to food that's the problem. It's not the food, it's how we respond to it.
Definitely. So tell us a little bit about how you've come to become so knowledgeable in this area.
So I myself, as most people, never really had a good relationship with food. I was always on and off some crazy diet. I remember dieting with my mum at a very, very, very young age. And it was almost like diets was like the in thing. So I did this from a very young age. And then I got into a lot of different addictions when I was growing up. And I kind of swapped those addictions, so other addictions, for fitness. So I got into fitness. And then when I got into fitness, I swapped, like I said, one obsession for another, and I got into competing. So I then competed. I did everything very all or nothing. Everything was all or nothing. Of
course. Okay.
And so this kind of is another kind of characteristic, a personality trait when it comes to, emotional eating and binging and things like that, and turning to food for comfort. It's a very strong characteristic trait, the very all or nothing mentality. And then after I'd competed, I ended up with an eating disorder. So basically, it was everything that I'd been kind of burying, down deep inside of me, and it all came out. So it all came out in foods. So it came out in really high anxiety, highly stressed. I was responding, at one point, and God, I shouldn't really be saying this, but I actually felt like I thought I needed to be sectioned. I was really highly anxious. And
Right.
like I said, my response to food wasn't good at all. So it was then from my journey from then, I then, started my, I don't want to say self-love journey, but I changed the way I saw myself. I changed the way I responded to foods. And and this is what's kind of brought me to today. So
Excellent. So just to confirm, it was when you were doing your training that is that what led to your eating disorders, or was that always there in the background?
So again, honestly, it was everything that had been buried. So you've got to kind of like put the picture. So there was obviously quite a lot going on from when I was young. I was never really happy with myself. I was never happy with how I looked. I always wanted to change me. So I always wanted to change everything about me. And that then led on to the behaviour, obviously, when I went to other external things. So then the other addictions came into play. But I still had these things burying on, buried deep. And then obviously when I went to compete, the restriction and obviously the prep dieting didn't help. So after obviously all the prepping, all the dieting, the restriction, this didn't help, and it massively contributed to my response to food after the competition had finished.
Interesting. So it was very interesting.
Yeah, it was a mixture of everything. So it was a mixture of, I would say, extreme restriction, extreme dieting, and also what was going on inside of me. So ignoring my emotions, not even ignoring, I think I didn't know how to deal with my emotions. I think a lot that was going on inside of me was very subconscious, and I didn't even realise there was affecting me until it came out in food.
So do you think that the experience that you had that's allowed you to get to this point, do you think that experience is common for women to go through?
Honestly, I mean, mine's obviously quite extreme because I went from one thing to another. But I do think that a lot of people struggle with food. A lot of people struggle either emotionally eating, either yo-yo dieting, either, not being fully happy with themselves. There's a lot of different things. So there's a lot of different angles we can kind of attack. But a lot of people struggle in multiple areas that then responds to how they react to food. Right.
So what I'm hearing there is that it's more to do with the lack of dealing with emotions appropriately. So it's neither a male or a female thing, or even an older person or a younger person thing. It's just a human thing.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, like I said, there's a lot of things going on. So it's not only the emotions, there's a lot of accumulating factors that are involved to not only, how we deal with emotions, how we see ourselves, which obviously affects how we feel, but obviously how we're trying to control foods. There's a lot of different things going on, with body shaming. There's a lot of different elements to it.
Yeah. Okay, that's really interesting. Is there like a top 3? So let's say, for example, okay, it doesn't cover all of them, but if you were able to, if you had a checklist and you had these top 3 things, it would give you an indication of whether you're of how severe the emotional eating situation might be. Are there 3 things that really seem to be the catalyst for emotional or binge eating?
So I think what happens is quite often people get in a cycle. So it's very much, and again, this cycle has become, I would almost say, the norm for people. They don't recognise that they're in this cycle because it becomes their norm. So when I say this, what I mean is they get in this very much diet. Right, I'm going to be good today, I'm going to eat healthy, I'm going to eat clean, I'm going to not have any naughty foods or bad foods. And they get in this real vicious cycle of right, okay, I'm going to start my diet today. I'm going to be really good. And then what happens is they then rely on willpower to try and stick to the diet. And if you think willpower is it's similar to, I want to kind of compare it to a muscle. It can only last so, it will only last so long. So willpower will only, when you're trying to fight something, it will only last so long. And then what happens is,
okay,
then they then eat at night and they're like, oh my goodness me, why have I eaten all these foods? I tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to start my diet again tomorrow. And then
right.
the end
So
cycle.
yeah, sorry. So by that you mean that throughout the day they may be, really straining that willpower muscle to stop themselves from doing something, and then by the evening or at some point in the day they will have become so fatigued, that part of them will become so fatigued that they give in to maybe that sweet treat or whatever it might be.
That's exactly it. Yeah, exactly. So it's almost like, for example, I'll just give you an example. I'm not saying this, but for example, say if somebody has eaten a lot at night, they've overindulged, they'll wake up and they won't be hungry. So what they'll do is they'll think, right, okay, I want to have breakfast. And then what will happen is lunchtime will come and then they'll think, oh, I'll have a salad. Now, I don't know about you, but lettuce does not fill
I think it's only rabbits that really appreciate lettuce.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, really, lettuce is not going to fill you. But because people are so desperately trying to be good and what their class is healthy, they choose something that's not going to fill them, that's 0 calories, and basically they're trying to almost starve themselves, but yet they are fighting. For example, I don't know about you, but have you ever worked in a company where they either bring cakes round or they bring things round to the staff?
Lots of treats. Yeah, lots of treats.
Yeah,
all over the place.
I mean, when I was going through my worst, I was working at somewhere that always had treats. And what tends to happen is people then go, no, I can't have that. And they really build this resistance against the food. And it's almost like they see food as the enemy. And the cakes, the problem. And then they're fighting and fighting and fighting this kind of desire, even though they actually want the cake. So this is the real kind of trauma. They want the cake, but they're fighting again, if that makes sense.
Right, and that's where that muscle kind of is being used and kind of fatigued as well because of that kind of battle that's going on.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's like a battle of the will. And also desire as well. So desire quite often, desire, cravings, triggers. There's a lot of different emotions going on, especially when somebody's fighting against something that they want.
Right.
And then what happens on the night time? Everything that they've said no to, they just go, oh my goodness me, I'm going to have it all. And then they just eat everything in sight. So it's like this willpower that they're fighting so hard, this willpower that's been really fighting these foods has just gone, right, okay, I've had enough.
So the work that you do then, would you say, obviously we're going to go into a bit more depth regarding the work that you specifically do, but is it more to do with strengthening the willpower, or is it more to do with dealing with the emotions?
So how I work with people, I work with conscious behaviours. So I work with the things that they can do on a day-to-day basis, but I also work with and I work with how they respond to things. So I work with their emotions and how they respond and how they respond to how they feel as well. Quite often people dismiss their body's natural signs to tell them how they feel. So they'll brush things off, bury things deep, and just ignore their body's physical response to say, right, okay, stop. We need to do something about this, So I work how they respond to food and how they respond to their emotions and how they respond to themselves as well.
Interesting.
Yeah, because quite often people don't actually like themselves neither.
Right. So would you say that really your work is the kind of maybe the awareness that there's an issue may start with food on a conscious level because they are binge eating or whatever it might be, but it's actually you're helping them find, like, rebuild a healthy connection with themselves and understanding their body and their mind and what those messages are that their body is sending them.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's more about reconnecting with themselves and reminding people that the food isn't the problem. The food is not the problem. The food is just the external response to how they're feeling inside. So,
Of course.
and when I say the external response, food is it can be other things that people turn to. So, for example, when people the external response that makes us feel good momentarily. So things like drugs, alcohol, sex, spending, gambling, all these things make us feel good momentarily. And then what happens? And then what happens afterwards? We can have buyer's remorse if we've been spending. For example, most people will have a time, and I know it's not talking on the emotional eating route here, but it's still an example. Most people will have a time when they buy something, they've gone out, bought something because they get a real good buzz from it, and then they get home only to say, "Oh my God, really? Do I really want that? I shouldn't have bought that. I feel a bit crap." And it's the same thing. Everything we do in life is for a feeling.
That's a very interesting point you make. Yeah, that's a very interesting point that you make. Is that an innate thing as a human being then, that we tend to be kind of always searching for something to give us a certain feeling?
I believe so. Yeah, definitely. I think everything we do is for a feeling. If you think about, our ultimate goal is to be happy and to feel loved and to feel the best version of ourselves. And that's all a feeling, isn't it? Everything is a feeling. Our ultimate goal is version, to feel the best version and to feel happiness, to feel joy, to feel love. Everything is a feeling.
Yeah. That's very interesting. So do you think that do you think this is common? Do you think that this is a widespread issue that people are turning to substances or behaviors or whatever it might be, instead of actually being able to listen to what their body's saying and address it appropriately?
Absolutely. I honestly think that regardless of whether people are aware of this or not, there will be for most people, this day and age, there will be something that I don't want to say they cannot live without, but there will be something that they either turn to or they enjoy, or they will probably see it as enjoyment, but there's that physical feeling that people get from whatever they're doing. Like you said, it's a real, I honestly think, most people have something in their life they turn to.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a very good point you make as well, because I remember I've had a conversation with a friend recently, and one of his friends was being quite judgmental about, I think it was drinking alcohol, and he was saying, "Oh, you shouldn't have this, and this, or you shouldn't have this much, or whatever." And then someone turned to him and said, "Well, I'd like to see you cut out sugar for a month." And he was like, "Oh yeah, but that's not damaging you." And it's kind of like, you just because you haven't done the research doesn't mean that it's not damaging you. It's still damaging you. You just don't know that it's damaging you. I think there's a lot of that going on, though. I think there's a lot of, because society has deemed it to be okay. Of course, there's more and more research coming out all the time regarding the negative effects of sugar, as well as tobacco, as well as alcohol, but it's still legal.
Yeah.
which is kind of giving it the green light, if you know what I mean. Like, yeah, you can take the branding, the pictures of branding off. You can put the pictures of, I don't know, people going through these terrible operations just to stay alive, but it's still available. It's still completely available. I find that quite shocking, to be honest, and it still kind of gives it that green light. Have you found that the people that you work with, do they tend to have, I'm assuming that you would consider emotional eating an addiction, is that right?
Well, again, so it's a real fine line between, because emotionally, I honestly feel that food can be addictive. Like you mentioned,
Yeah.
sugar. Sugar, for me, there's two different ways to look at sugar. So there's very much the artificial way and there's the natural way. So
Right.
you're speaking about the artificial sugar, so the sugar that obviously, the granulated sugar and all things like that, the sugar that's in a lot of, things like cakes and chocolates and things like that, then that type of sugar can be highly, highly addictive. And don't get me wrong, I think, I do think that natural sugars are also very good for the body as well. So we need, obviously, carbohydrates, we need natural sugars, we need, but again, it's how much people have. If they are having lots and lots and lots of, I don't know, for example, Coke every day, that's really highly addictive. And I don't mean the drug Coke, I mean like Coca-Cola. That's highly, we can get confused then which one we meant. I'm not talking about the one that goes up your nose. But yeah.
Okay, yeah, you definitely don't want to pour this one up your nose, that's for sure.
But that, for example, people drink bottles and bottles of it.
Definitely, yeah.
That's highly addictive. And again, I think, it's how we respond to the food that's the main issue here. Regardless whether it's sugar, regardless whether it's fats, regardless whether it's carbohydrates, regardless whatever it is, proteins, whatever. The actual issue is how we respond to it, how our bodies respond to it, and
Right.
that for me, that's the main concern. If somebody has, shed loads of sugar in front of them but doesn't touch it, their response is brilliant, or they don't feel a desire to touch it. That's very different to somebody who comes in and really gets that heart beating, they start getting anxious, they start, really wanting and desiring and triggered by the sugar. That's a very different, two different people.
Yeah, that's a very interesting point. That's very interesting. So they're just like genetically more inclined to become addicted to it.
Again, I personally think, for me, when you say genetically, I honestly do believe that when we say genetically, it can come from how, the habits and the behaviors from our family. So, for example, we can pick up our family. So, for example, if your mum and dad, all they've ever, known and all they've ever, known themselves, again, it's education and knowledge. If all they've ever known is, I don't know, fast food, sugary treats, that is naturally going to be passed on to their children. Because the education and the knowledge isn't there. So that what the children are going to do is that's going to be their norm. So I'm not necessarily sure the addiction is there through genetics. I just think it's there through, habits and behaviors.
Yes, that sounds like more of a nurture. A nurture dynamic there. One thing I did research recently was something called epigenetics, and that's basically whereby, due to your environment, certain aspects of your DNA will be triggered. So maybe if they are in an environment where they always have those kind of sugary treats around them, it starts to activate certain kind of cravings, maybe even for it, going into their future as well, potentially.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is, the epigenetics thing. I've read about that as well, and But yeah, absolutely. So it is going to trigger something. If your environment and if you've been constantly surrounded by something, then you are going to, because not only you've been surrounded by it, but 9 times out of 10 you will have had it. It is going to trigger
Right.
something inside. It is a bit
Right.
like, again, like, I don't want to say an addict, but again, if you've had something all your life and then you go without it, it is going to trigger something.
So how do you think, I mean, obviously you can go based off of some of the information regarding people who you've worked with, people who you talked with, but how do you think people's eating habits have changed, or have changed really since the pandemic kicked in?
I mean, I've just been actually chatting to some people in my group, to be fair, and one of the ladies said that, her eating has got worse since obviously all the lockdown. And again, it all stems from, because our emotions are heightened, and the world's in a crisis, isn't it? We're in a crisis, and how we're responding internally is going to show how we're responding externally to things like foods.
Right.
So people are going to be struggling a lot more, definitely. And especially because we're in the house all the time as well. When we're in the house all the time, and quite often the kitchen's a trigger area for people.
Right.
Quite a lot of people, they can just stand in the kitchen and just graze, or and when we're in the house constantly, boredom kicks in. That's another big thing. Boredom's a big one. So there's a lot of factors going on. There's the emotions that are going on inside. Like I said before, how we feel inside determines how we respond to things, definitely.
Interesting. So it's an interesting point you make there, because I would have thought it would be almost exclusively the stress, but you said also the boredom will play a big factor as well when it comes to emotionally eating, or just overeating in general, because you're trying to fill that gap, so to speak.
Definitely. And you've got to remember as well, food is one of life's pleasures. Food is meant to be enjoyed, isn't it? It's meant to be enjoyed. So if we're feeling stressed, or we're feeling anxious, or we've had a hard day, what do we want? We want something that's going to make us feel good.
Yeah, of course. So to go off what you've just mentioned there, what is your approach then when it comes to these kinds of foods that may not be so good for them in large quantities? Is it to completely cut it out of their diet? Is it to have a structured kind of approach to it? How can they move forwards in a healthier way regarding consumption of food?
So again, there's a few things that you said there. So if somebody wants a healthy, happy, balanced relationship with food, the first thing they need to do is stop restricting, stop avoiding, stop eliminating any food groups. Because what tends to happen, and I don't know about you, but like, for example, and I'm going to give you a different example which isn't food. I'm going to give you an example which is food. When you say, I'm going to give you a first example which is food, but like when you say to, right, that's it, I'm never eating chocolate again, what happens?
Okay. I will find chocolate.
Exactly. And it's like another example, and it's nothing to do with food, but what happens, say for example, you really like this girl and she's giving you the cold shoulder, she didn't want you, or you feel a little bit rejected, what happens?
You like her even more.
Exactly. Always want something that we can't have.
Of course.
Always. So when we restrict, and when we say, right, okay, I'm eliminating this food group, or when we say I'm, cutting this, I'm cutting sugar out, I'm cutting carbohydrates out, what tends to happen is we want it more, right?
Right.
To get a healthy, happy relationship, a balanced relationship with food, you need to first allow yourself and give yourself permission to be able to have these foods instead of,
Okay.
because the permission and giving yourself permission is the first step to everything. Giving yourself permission to have the foods is everything.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So it's not about restricting it. It's not about cutting it out. It's about allowing it in a healthy way. Is that what you're trying to say?
It's allowing yourself and giving yourself permission to have any foods that you desire,
Okay.
any foods you desire when you desire them. And when you have that mindset, what then tends to happen is you stop craving. You don't have the triggers when you see the food that you want. You don't have the guilt and shame around after eating the foods that you eating the foods that you desire and that you want. You don't have that guilt, that shame. And then what happens is when you give yourself permission to have any of these foods, what will naturally happen is you will naturally turn to healthy, nutritious foods, knowing that you can have that bit of chocolate, knowing that you can have that bit of cake anytime you want. And
that's interesting.
yeah.
So it kind of am I right in saying that it kind of lessens the magnetism that certain food groups will have on you, or food options will have on you, because you haven't said, I won't eat that now?
Absolutely. That is absolutely it. So it's more, it lessens the emotions and it lessens the desire and it lessens the craving and it lessens all those emotions that are stuck in the body, that the physical feeling that you're getting when you see a food that you're craving, when you see a food that you've said to yourself you cannot have.
Interesting. So, I mean, this stuff that you're talking about right now, it seems like it should be something that is taught from a very young age. Of course, it can benefit a person of any age, but it seems like this should be part of a curriculum, even in terms of, if your parents aren't aware of this knowledge, how can they be kind of ensuring that they're educating their children about how to eat or to manage their emotions in a healthy way? Do you think enough is being done in school to make people aware of these issues?
Honestly, do you know what? I really do not know because I haven't been around schools. But I buy this, and I don't want to really bring the diet industry into it. But the diet industry has, it's made a business on people buying, diet products, lots
Right.
of different. So I honestly, I mean, like you said, our parents, children's parents, they're not aware of this. So as far as most concerned, most people, the way most people see, food and their body is the best way to, either, look good is to go on a diet, and it is to manage your food, and it is to restrict certain foods. So ultimately, what they're not realizing is this restriction is actually causing a problem. They're not seeing the restriction and the dieting and all this external things that we're doing is actually taking us away from listening to our internal, our gut intuition, our, hunger, when we hungry, when we feel, and stop when we feel full. All these external things are taking us away from being very in tune with ourselves, being very in tune with how we feel and how we respond.
Okay, so I mean, I've got a question for you now in terms of, a potential listener who's dieted their whole life, so that's kind of been their thing. and they're hearing your message, and your message is, you don't need to restrict food. Just you need to. Obviously, there's more to it than just you can eat anything. But
Yeah.
um, um, let's say, for example, where are we at now? We're at the end of February, going into March, and they want to lose, let's say, between 10 to 15 kilos by, I don't know, August, let's say. Their way previously of doing it was to just restrict as much as possible. They're only eating lettuce. They're only drinking Coca-Cola, whatever their diet is. I don't know what kind of diet that they're using to get their weight down. What would your approach be with a client who wanted to lose that amount of weight in that amount of time?
So firstly, when I work with people, I make it very, very clear it is not a weight loss program. So how I work with people, I work with them getting a better relationship with themselves and food. And what then will happen long term. So I work with people on a long term basis so that they are never dieting again. They will always they will have the right tools and techniques to be able to manage emotions and manage their stress properly without turning to food. So my main focus is them in a good place and taking themselves away from having that weight loss goal, because when we when we focus on losing weight, what tends to happen quite often when we focus on it, the opposite happens. So when we are so obsessed with losing weight, what will happen is we will eat salad and then we will overeat on a night. So, and we get very, very obsessed with our weight when what we should be looking into is helping how we respond to foods and helping how our lifestyle, so we have a healthy, happy life, long term, not short term goal.
So do you think one of the main issues then is that there are too many like unrealistic expectations being put on us in regards to how we should look?
Absolutely, definitely. I mean, I've been there as well. I've done, like I said, I did the bikini modeling. I did competition, not modeling, bikini competitions. I think there's massive expectations how we look, definitely. And I mean, look at social media. You look at social media, and there's already somebody that, everybody is very much the physical appearance. Everybody. And I think, I mean, even when you look at, and I hate the word fat or thin, but I'm just going to say this when you think of, I mean, in different societies, the word fat actually means different things in different countries. So if you look at,
point, yeah.
you know what I mean? We in our society, people say the word fat, and they kind of take it as a negative thing. But yet, if you look at another country, look at China, or they look at some, Eastern Asian countries, that Southeast Asia, they actually, like China, for example, they actually see that as wealth.
Yes, yeah, of course,
So
because they wouldn't be able to get to that size if they hadn't the money to fund it.
Exactly. It's all perception and how we see it and what we believe it to be.
Of course. But, so just kind of digging into that a bit deeper now. So do you think the move towards things like plus size modeling and that sort of stuff, do you think that that's a move in the right direction?
I think, we should absolutely love who we are, right, how we are right here today. I think that people have to be themselves inside as well as outside. And I believe that if people do want to, I'm not saying that, trying to lose weight is a bad thing or wanting to lose weight is a bad thing. I'm not saying that at all. What I'm saying is, we need to be happy and healthy or how we are and we need, regardless of size.
Interesting. Do you think
And
then that being happy and healthy should be our ultimate goal?
I honestly think, like I said, I think that most people, if you ask most people what they want out of life, it would be to be happy, healthy, and to be loved. And most people would say, if you would say, you know, maybe to be wealthy, whatever it is, most people, I do think that most people want that. Yeah, definitely.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, it definitely resonates with me. And if I think about, you know, why I've made some of the changes that I've made over the past year or so, I've made a real focus on like mental health, and I've made a real focus on, it's not that I'm not interested in wealth at all, but I had to make a decision about priorities. And up until that point, I was prioritizing wealth far too much at the detriment of my health. I feel like I've gotten to a point now where I can start putting a little bit more time into the wealth side of things, but only because I've exclusively, or pretty much exclusively, just focused on my health for the past probably 12 months. Not 12 months, I'll say exclusively for probably the last 6 months. And it's made a huge difference. Do you think, so when you're working with some of your clients, do you ever find that they have to make some lifestyle change, like some quite drastic lifestyle changes to form a healthy relationship with eating?
So again, like, so for me, it is a lifestyle. It is, I don't want to say dramatic change, but it is, because it's things that they have never done before. 9 times out of 10, the things that I implement with them is things that they've never done before. And we really do focus on, like you said, their mental health, how they feel inside about themselves. And ultimately, when you make space for that, and you then create a really good space in your head, and you focus on inside, then what happens on the outside, things respond to that. So when I do focus a lot about how they feel about themselves and how they respond to stress, and then what happens is, and also how food, and then what happens is, in the long term, they won't be emotional eating, not even in the long term, but they will stop turning to food for this emotional crutch. They will stop turning to food because it makes them feel better. The more they focus on internal health and making themselves feel better from the inside, it affects everything else on the outside.
Excellent. Cool. Well, I've got a few final questions for you, and the first one is, let's say one of our listeners, you know, has really taken what you've been talking about today to heart. I definitely resonate with what you're saying, because I've noticed a significant shift in my life as a whole through starting to deal with some of the internal stuff, the emotions, the resentments, whatever it might be. Addressing those things have definitely had a significant impact on my life as a whole, and the cravings that I used to have almost, if not completely, dissipated. And when they do come up, they're a lot more manageable, because that fire has been kind of, or that fuel, I should say, for the fire has kind of been kind of taken out to a certain extent. How can a listener who's listening to us right now, how can they get started today? What's their first, let's say, 2 to 3 steps that they can get started with today to start moving in that right direction?
So firstly, can I just comment on something that you just said?
Sure.
So you said that your response and your cravings have lessened because obviously you've been dealing with your emotions, which is absolutely fantastic. But you've got to remember that is just, and I want to say, like, that's just part of the cake, part of the pie. So, for example, with emotional eating and when we respond to foods, like I said, the emotion is massive. It really is, but it's just a piece of it. So if you are still getting some, cravings, and you are getting some, you are getting triggered by certain foods, even if it's lessened, I would again go back to, right, okay, giving yourself full permission to have these foods, firstly.
Okay.
So at any time, any place, giving yourself full permission to have these foods. And then once you give yourself permission and truly give yourself permission, that is when the cravings will lessen, because you can have them anytime. You don't have to wait. You don't have to wait, till you next see them in a shop. Just really concentrate on that as well, because that's another part of the puzzle. So there's plenty of different angles to go at this with, and there's plenty of different, like I say, I always say, like making a cake. You can't make a cake with one ingredient. You've got lots of different ingredients to make that cake, and think of it in the same way. You've dealt with one ingredient. Now there's other things that you need to look at as well.
Yeah, for sure. But is there for someone who is, because obviously I've been working on this stuff for quite a while, and I've been working with a professional in terms of my mental health. I've been, doing some self-help work. I've been reading. There's lots of different things I've been doing to get to this point. But for someone who has no knowledge in the area except for having listened to this as we're speaking right now, what do you think should be their first, second, and maybe third step with this process?
Very first thing would be to stop dieting and stop restricting. Give yourself full permission to eat whatever you want. Absolutely give yourself full permission to eat whatever you want. I would also say change how you speak to yourself. So if you're speaking to yourself in a very negative way, change how you're talking to yourself, because that's just going to create more negativity, and the more negativity will create the body, the more negative responses the body's going to give. So a thought creates a feeling creates a response. So every thought we have creates a feeling, and every feeling we have creates a response to either food or something. So I would say, like I said, diets and restrictions, that's the first thing. Give yourself permission. I would also say how you speak to yourself, change how you speak to yourself. And I would also say listen to your body, listen to your body's emotions, listen to what your body is saying. Feel the emotion, whatever emotion it is. There's no good or bad emotion. Just feel it and recognize it and allow it.
Perfect. Tania, thank you very much for being so open with your knowledge. Could you tell our listeners now what you provide with your service?
So I've actually got a Facebook group. So I've got a group. As for programs, I do one-to-one coaching. I also do group coaching. So I'm just opening group coaching in April. So that's going to be fantastic. I'm actually just taking March. So in fact, I don't know if it's going to be open in March, to be fair. So I'm doing a one-to-one program, and I also do group programs. I'm hoping to have a self-study program out soon. That's not been, yeah.
Very busy lady.
Yeah, lots of things in the pipeline. But at the moment in time, it's group.
Yeah, sorry, please go for it.
Sorry, what did you say? Say that again.
Yeah, no, please go for it. Sorry, I cut you off there by mistake.
Oh, sorry, no. So I said at this moment in time, it's one-to-one programs and a group program as well.
Yeah, perfect. I mean, yeah, it's great that you are offering these different options for sure. And obviously that the self-study one that you're working on as well. It sounds like it's an issue that is really widespread. So I can see how this is going to help a lot of people. So it's really good work that you're doing. I'm very happy to have you on the show today, and what you've shared with us has really been invaluable. So thank you very much for that. Is there anything else that you would like to share with the audience before we head off?
No, not at all. Obviously, people can head over to my website, which is beatthebinge.com. But yeah, if anybody wants to reach out at me, they can find me on Beat the Binge on Instagram, or my Facebook group is How to Stop Emotionally Eating. So yeah, if anyone wants to connect or ask any questions, please feel free to do so. Yeah, I'm pretty chatty, as you can tell. So I'm happy.
No, I love it. I love it. It's all quality. It's all quality that's coming out of your
Yeah,
out of your mouth. So it's all good.
I get a bit passionate. I do. I did pre-warn you.
No, you didn't really require any kind of getting back on the rails. It was very well delivered, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. I'd love to have you back on the show again at some point for sure. Just for the listeners, if you are interested in any of the links that Tania mentioned, I will be putting them into the YouTube description, so you'll be able to just click on that. And also, Tania, of course, I will put a link to the video once it's complete and ready on your group as well.
Fabulous, thank you.
Excellent. Well, Tania, it's been go on, go. Yeah, no, I'm getting some thanks. I'll wait and listen to this.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, and it's been nice to chat.
Of course. No, it's been an absolute pleasure, and I'm really glad that obviously that we met, and that you're involved with this kind of work. It's great to see the Rawai family kind of doing good in the world.
Yeah, and do you know what? Honestly, you're exactly the same. So I feel that, like, we've got to do our life's purpose, and we've got to do something that's fulfilling, and it's got to be something that that's fulfilling for me and helping others as well. And I know the work that you're well, so what you're doing is fantastic.
I'm trying, and I'm taking it one step at a time, and I'm the main thing for me is being authentic throughout. At previous points in my life, I've had goals and dreams, many of which I did achieve, but at some points there was a lack of authenticity there, and I've really taken a step back the last couple of months specifically to really get a really deep understanding of what I genuinely want and who I want to be for the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years moving forwards. So thank you again. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Yeah, and that will change as well. Who you is going to change continuously. But do you know what? Even stripping that back and going back to that place where you're going deep, that's brilliant. I love it. Yeah, I really like that.
It's been an absolute pleasure, Tania. I'll speak to you soon, and expect the video up in the next couple of days.
Okay. Thank you again for having me. I really appreciate it.
No problem. Take care. I'll speak soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.